Day number 1 of the FNCS Grand Finals have just concluded, and I'm going to get you up to speed onto what happened to some of the big boys like Mr. Savage and Hen, Thomas HD and Trippin, Reason and Noah Rayleigh, and I'm also going to run you through how the teams that won the games, the big boys like Vidil, Tayson and Chapix of Spawn, Malabuka and Murstache, Cammy and Seti, and how everyone got along in the first day of the Grand Finals. Let's get into game number 1. Game number 1 started off as expected, I think, for a lot of people's predictions. Tayson and Chapix running it up and taking the first win up against Podosai and X-Rees in the mid-map. Chapix was able to get the revive back on top of Tayson with no real issues and no actual third party coming out of Malabuka and Murstache, surprisingly enough. Towards the Rave Cave, Thomas HD and Trippin, who were thought to be uncontested over at the South Slurp Truck, were actually landed on by Artskill and his duo, and unfortunately Thomas HD goes down early on into the game, giving them an advantage in that early spawn fight, and Trippin having to run away and reboot Thomas into that game gives them a very, very poor game number 1 and an unfortunate start going into FNCS Grand Finals. Over towards Cammy Spit side, we saw Puchara and Shari actually landing on the gas station portion of Cammy Spit, and Cammy and Seti were forced to land over towards the north. Yapko and Karma didn't actually end up landing on the Star Wars chest on top of them, so Seti and Cammy still had that northern loot path, but a lot of the loot and the possibility of getting grapplers from that south side of Rocky Wheels were taken away from them, and Cammy and Seti are basically left looting basically garbage loot for game number 1 and the rest of this final as well. We even saw Cammy going deep into Tilted Towers to find extra loot, something that we don't really see too often for them also, so we're really seeing them struggle in this Grand Finals. Moving over towards the mid game, Mr. Savage and Hen actually made it off the spawn with no real issues. Unfortunately for them though, in this mid game, they were basically below, search 50 below, trying to tag and trying to get some damage done. They get taken out very early on. For a very disappointing game, all things considered, pulling right next to Tilted Towers, so you would have expected a little bit better performance for them, and they started off weak, which isn't too great going into this day 1. On the opposite side though, we saw Jackson and Vico all on top of high ground going into first moving, and looking like they were poised to win the first game they've ever won inside of an FNCS Grand Finals, and this was a zone in this half and half that pulled back towards the south side, so on top of Vico and Jackson, Tayson, Queasy, all the big boys on the northern side of the map, they struggled with this rotate. Tayson getting pressured, actually making that half and half rotate look free though, but still losing out on a bunch of mats, which is definitely going to affect the performance in this game overall. Going into first moving, Vico and Jackson kept it strongly. No one really looked like they were actually going for it at all, which is surprising because we have a lot of very strong high ground duos in this FNCS Grand Final, but nobody really tempted to go for it yet. So we're seeing a trend that we saw also back into the FNCS semifinals of teams not taking high ground when possible, and no one really looked at it, so Vico and Jackson looked like they were going to get this win for free from there. This game was all about the mid-ground layering and fighting from Joe and Z Andy. They came through with an insane amount of kills in that mid-ground, actually surprising a lot of people. I don't think they were going to be as consistent as they were in any of these games, but they were sort of running through this mid-ground layer, dominating, shooting at everyone else, finding multiple kills, playing coordinated together, and looking very impressive for the FNCS Grand Finals. It ended up in a final 2v2 between Vico and Jackson and Z Andy and Joe, and unfortunately for Z Andy and Joe, they did find themselves 9 kills in this game, but weren't able to pick up the win, and Vico and Jackson found themselves the first win of the FNCS Grand Finals against everyone else's expectation, and also the expectations of players who are supporting Mr. Savage. And you can see the reaction from them as well at the same time was a little bit interesting to say the least, but definitely deserved, and they were super happy about it.
Fucking go, nigga! Nice! Fucking go, Jan! Nice, nigga! Let's go! Yeah, man! Ah! I my motherfucking high ground, Digga, wir haben!
Game number 2 started exactly the way that game number 1 started, with Tayson and Chapix finding the 2v2 off spawn and finding those early game kills on X-Rees and Podosai. Again, it wasn't really that close. The draws for Tayson and Chapix were immaculate. Chapix getting himself the first gun, getting the initial kill, trading damage with Podosai, and them taking both of them out within a matter of 5 seconds. So the good thing here for these spawn fights for Tayson and Chapix essentially is that there is not any sort of chance for Malabuka, Merciless to third party this situation. That even turned into a mid-game fight that they were able to third party with ADN and Arthur and Mixon, which was started actually by Artskill running away from Rave Cave. Tayson finding himself extra kills in that as well, and that's going to set up Tayson and Chapix for a very good game number 2 after a very impressive start in that game. Over towards the other side in mid-game, we see Reason and Noah Rayleigh again struggling in game number 2. Reason getting caught out by Vico and Jackson. They were trying to W key for Surge, and in the end they were taken out. Noah down to 1 HP, but unfortunately even with that, Noah wasn't able to clutch up, and Reason and Noah with 5 points into game number 2 struggling, as a lot of people would have expected. I think in terms of predictions, they weren't looking like the hottest duo going into this grand finals, and this grand finals performance so far has shown that as well. Pink and Anas in the mid game actually playing a little bit aggressively, finally up to 15 points in first game. Sort of a slow start, but you know, they were coming through very good in this grand final. Pink this game was absolutely insane, as you'll see later on into this game, finding himself early kills on Kiro and Jurdy, which was going to set them up into that third zone, fourth zone rotate with Max Mats, and give themselves a very, very strong game number 2 here. Back over to Mr. Savage and Hen again in the mid game. Game number 2 below Storm Surge. Savage trying to find a W key in this mid game. But even without the Storm Surge, if you look at the mat count and the health and the shield and everything combined, they're looking like they're struggling in any of these mid-game rotates, and they're in trouble in this grand final, so to see. Going into this first moving, Venom and Queasy, as always, looking like one of the most stacked teams in the lobby with their grapplers. So far, with 47 points off of game number 1, they were looking stronger than ever, just like everyone's expectations. They always went up for the early high ground retakes, taking away from Frey and Flixie as well, and being dominant on that high ground. They weren't able to convert it in any of these games, I feel like, though, but they were looking very, very consistent compared to the rest of the lobby, and they were looking like a shoe-in to win this FTS Grand Finals day number 1. In this game itself, they got pressure a lot off of high ground, and the game ends for them pretty early on, but not a bad start for them into this grand final. But over towards the high ground, Vefscott and Clan, who are the enemies of Queasy and Venom, as you'll see later on into this video, took the high ground into that second moving zone, looking at finding pressure. But this end game, it was all about Pink and Anas. Well, not Anas, because Anas went down very early on, but Pink absolutely dominating and running through the lobby, finding himself a bunch of kills on the mid game. And this was Pink's FNCS Grand Final. He was insanely impressive, clutching up, has ice in his vein, and put up a massive clutch in the final moving zones here. The final 1v1 came down to Vefscott versus Hellfire. Hellfire with the high ground retake, took it away. It was a 1v1v1, turning into a 1v1, and Hellfire from below with no mats, able to find the big shot under pressure and take out Vefscott for a 6-kill win in game number 2. Game number 3 started exactly the same way as game number 1 and number 2. Chapix and Tayson with insanely good drops. This time Podosai fought back a little bit more though, found another kill, but Tayson able to clutch it out and find himself that 3rd kill. Unfortunately now, Chapix did get finished by Podosai, and that meant Malibu and Mercers can come over and push this and third party this fight, which meant that Tayson had to put on his running shoes, run away from the situation, and he has to find a reboot position. Going over towards Greasy, Vidil with 40 points in 2 games so far has been very impressive. Found himself some early game surge on a player rotating through. Hen with an AK found himself an early game kill on Jackson as well. Hopefully this will help them in the best of this game, because they've been struggling with their mid game rotates and surge, and finding himself early surge there is massive. Going over towards the mid game, back to no Aurelian Reason. Unfortunately for them, they're gonna get 2v1 here by Vidil with insane shots from Vidil, showing off why he's a potential FNCS Grand Final winner in this final, and he takes out both of them with 1 foul, and that's gonna set them up very strongly into this 3rd game, finding himself mats and a big refresh. No Aurelian Reason at the same time, struggling on the mid game rotates yet again, and 9 points in 3 games is all they're gonna get this game with a late rotate. Moving over towards Tayson and Chapix, and again here they found Savage and Hen caught lacking. This time, even though they had their surge, the loot this time was looking a lot better. The mat count and the rotations were struggling, and Savage and Hen get caught out in the mid game yet again. And I'm not really sure what's happening with this duo in this final, but they're sort of not looking like the strong selves. These are 2 very competent players, not living up to their own expectations. Going into the first moving zone, it was Frey and Flixie on the high ground, but Flixie gets caught out by a big shot by Bevies and Vortexers, and that loses them that high ground, unfortunately for them. But it was Queasy and Veno who took over high ground away from Vortexers and Bevies, and again looking like they were winning another game on this high ground, keeping it up to 82 points in total. So they are taking high ground early on into the game, not able to fully finish out these games and take the win on high ground, but even if they are playing high ground, they're still getting themselves top 10 performances every time, and that's good enough to put them in the top 3 and basically in the first place at the end of this game. DKS though was the man of the show in game number 3, finding himself insane amount of kills, and this FNC's Grand Finals was all about solo clutching, and DKS really showed why he's one of the best controller players in Europe and maybe even the world currently, with this insanely impressive clutch in the late game. Deceptors went down early, DKS was able to find himself a bunch of kills, super insane, able to find a consistent aim, himself top 2 in this game. The final 2v2 ended up being DKS versus Vidil, and at the same time Vidil in this game found himself a bunch of white heals in the backside of zone, so there were 7 duos left alive, and he basically just healed off his way into the final moving zone in this game and found himself that 1v1 finally up against DKS, and Vidil does not miss his shots, and that's going to give him an 8-kill win in game number 3 and giving the German boys hope of a potential FNCS Grand Final win, being super impressive with their current placements. And of course, Vidil's reaction, as always, the entertainer, was quite good, and this is it, so enjoy. Game number 4 started exactly the way that you would expect, yet again, with Tayson and Chapix finding another spawn fight kill against Xcrews and Polosai, making it 4-0 in a 50-50 draw spot, which is very impressive if you guys don't know. You know, it really shows the preparation of that Chapix and Tayson put into this grand final, perfecting this drop. So now Chapix was super prepared doing drop practice the day before, even skipping out on the trio tournaments, and that's definitely showed off. So moving over towards Rave Cave again, Thomas HG and Trippin getting affected and W-keyed by Nebs and Marine, and Trippin left to solo clutch it. Unfortunately, in the mid game, Malibu and Mercer so far were doing okay in this grand final, but they were struggling in the mid game surge, and Camion City were now the recipients of a W key, and another poor day for Camion City gets even worse as they die early on into the game. Moving on towards the mid game, we see Reason and No Really, and it's again the same name of the game. This time they were 850 above surge, but they tried to W key a team a little bit too late, which caused the Forza rotation to be too late, and they got lacking on this rotate and ending game number 4 with a measly 21 points in total. Going into first moving zone of this game, it was Haikus and Vortex actually on the high ground who were trying to keep it. Over in that first part of moving zone, Hen and Savage, again, looking a little bit rough here. Savage gets a drop down, Hen's not with him, no coordination between this duo really, and they both go down very early on to this game for 38 points in 4 games in total. Veno and Queasy in the meantime, up to 115 points in total now, playing super consistent. Veno fragging, playing his natural ability as always, and securing themselves first place in this final by far 4 games in. But it was Kylie and FastRoki on the high ground who took it away from basically no one, because not a lot of teams actually are going for high ground in this grand final, and they were able to control the pace of the game. Back down towards mid ground, Ziani and Chapix, as always, consistent, made every single moving zone so far in this final, and did it yet again in this game with Ziani and Joe running through this mid ground, finding themselves extra kills. It ended again in the final 2v2 between Joe, Ziandi, and Kylie and FastRoki. Unfortunately for the low ground team though, it was Kylie and FastRoki who found the big shots and won game number 4 with an impressive effort from high ground. Now in game number 5, we're going to flip the script, because it was actually Polosai and Xcrews who finally found themselves the first win off spawn against Tayson and Chapix. Tayson came to my chat, said it was unlucky and that he didn't really find the shots that he wanted, and Xcrews and Polosai won that. And unfortunately, that could be the difference between Tayson and Chapix potentially winning this FNCS. Just this one game and this one mistake and this one unfortunate circumstance of having some bad luck here, and Polosai took it away from them and found themselves 2 early kills. They did get the revive back up, no finishes coming out, so there's no third party for Malibu and Murstache. Here we go, another broken record, no alien reason, stuck again inside of third zone, getting W keyed by Vidil and Janus, who are looking so confident in this grand final. Vidil not missing a single shot, again finding themselves more kills in this final, and that's 2 more. And here is Yandy, and I'm just going to show you guys my reaction from my stream, because I think that does it justice for what happened in this situation. So now, go down to 40, sorry, for Surge. So he should be fine, doesn't need to panic, he's going to go for it though. He started steady as a solo. But that Polish ping is a little bit too crazy. Oh, he finds the... Oh, my God. He finds the cone as well. There's another play. Oh! Ziandi! Move! What the fuck has he just done? This zone was a tilted zone yet again, so it pulled back south towards tilted side. So expect it to be a good game for Mr. Savage and Hen. And it actually was until the 7th zone, where they got themselves stuck without any sort of mats. 3 kills, 9th place was the best performance so far, I feel like, in this grand final. So they were getting a little bit better. This zone was good for them, but this game it was all about Malibuca and Mursash on the high ground yet again. We saw them had a very good mid game before. W King, Sunny, and Cammy now on the high ground again, taking it. Mursash finding shots from above, nothing really else to focus on. 1v1 against Mursash, you're never gonna win those, and Mursash find themselves the kill to win game number 5, and that's gonna bring them back up on top of the leaderboard, because they were struggling before this. Mid game surge, mid game fights, they weren't looking too hard, but 1 game win here is gonna move you all the way up to the leaderboard and give you a fighting chance of this FNCS Grand Final. Game number 6 was back to business as usual for Tayson and Chapix, with the better drop by far compared to X-Rays and Polarside. Good damage done by Tayson, finding it more, and Polarside gets taken out very swiftly afterwards as well. And that is a good start with a 5-1 end score for day number 1 for Tayson and Chapix against Polarside and X-Rays. Absolutely insane performance, putting themselves into the top 10 while being contested is insane. Queasy and Veno yet again having a poor game here in game number 6 now. Unfortunately, they got W keyed inside of Sanctuary and they got taken out. So Veno and Queasy back-to-back bad games, getting W keyed and losing it. Over towards the mid game, Hen and Savage looking okay, but we're below Surge, forcing Hen to overpeak just a little bit to find Surge. Gets caught up from behind, forcing Savage to run away. Unfortunately, he runs out of mats, and that was the end of day number 1 for Savage and Hen, and a very poor start with 78 points in total. Would have expected a little bit better considering all the tilted and mid-map zones for them today, but unfortunately they weren't able to connect it in the end. Going into the final moving zone, final first moving zone of this grand final, it was Thomas HD and Trippin who were taking it for now, on top of the high ground for once. Had a bad start to the tournament, this time we're in height, keeping it seems like, but yet again it was all about Malibuca and Mursash in this endgame, with Malibuca clutching enough, finding themselves a bunch of kills and this insane 2v1 situation. I'll give you guys the perspective of Malibuca and his reaction, because that's the only thing that can do it justice in this spot, and that gives Malibuca and Mursash back-to-back wins, ending off day number 1 almost on top of the leaderboard.
Top 2, один 2. Хорош? Окей. Сейчас умру за зоной. Найс! Найс! Найс!
At the end of day number 1, the leaderboard goes as following. Vidil and Janus in first place with 193 points. Joe and Ziani in second with 188. Malibuca and Mursash with 184. Pink and Nas with 156. And Tayson and Chapix in 5th place with 137 points in total. So the top 5 is absolutely insanely stacked. Veno and Queasy just out of the top 5 in 6th with 135 points in total. But it seems like this FNCS Grand Final is looking like a 3-horse race between Vidil, Joe, and Ziani, and Mursash and Malibuca. But as you know, day 2s can always change. It's all about who does the best in these situations, who can keep up with the pressure, and that's what day 2 is all going to be about. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of recap, make sure you subscribe, because another one's coming out tomorrow right after the Grand Finals is finished. I'm doing a viewing party of the Grand Finals on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/CoachBoop. So if you want to see me react to this stuff and sort of have fun or talk about sort of predictions or analysis stuff like that, make sure you guys join and ask me a question. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.